Hey everybody out there, this is Seto, and today for you guys we're going to be talking about a topic that personally I feel has been beaten to death like a dead horse, so to speak. That's an old analogy. You know, it's been beaten, you're still beating a dead horse. It's dead and you're still like harping on it. And that is YuGiOh Dying, or let's talk about more specifically the health of the Yu-Gi-Oh card game in a nutshell. And let's go a step further and let's talk about the health of Yu-Gi-Oh just in general, I guess you could say. So let me first start off by saying, and I know I may be a little bit biased, but I've literally heard since probably 2004 or 2005 that Yu-Gi-Oh is dying. I have heard this analogy so much, and I've heard it'll be dead in 2 to 3 years. It'll be gone in 2 to 3 years. The game is broken. The game is this. The game is that. The game is power creep. It's this. You hear it. I've heard it so much. Literally for 10 years, since 05, and the game started in 03, really, in 02. You know, so literally 10 years I've heard this, and I've been in this game for a long time. It's literally, it gets old and it gets boring, and it's something that somebody just wants to hype up. I'm not trying to do that, okay? Please do not think I'm trying to make clickbait. Please do not think I'm running out of ideas. I just want to get the point clear and my point of view about this. I made a video about this last year, and it feels like every year there is some person out there that has to say Yu-Gi-Oh is dying, or you don't see the light, man. The game's dying. It's dead, you know, literally. The game had the most chance of dying. If you really want to know when the game had the most chance of dying, is back in 2004 and 2005 when the original Yu-Gi-Oh anime with Yugi Moto, what is it called? What is the game called? Yu-Gi-Oh, and they stopped making the show about Yugi. When they did that, the game had the most chance to die after that. But what happened? We've gone through GX, we've gone through 5Ds, we've gone through Zexal, we're in Arc 5 now. That's about 4 generations later, and there's been multiple different formats, multiple different decks, multiple different things coming out, and the game is still here 10 years later. Yeah, it's definitely dead if it's been lasting, you know, 13 plus years, yeah. Now, saying that aside, as you can probably guess, I do not think Yu-Gi-Oh is dying. I think, I don't know what to say exactly. I just know that it's not dying, and it's not going to die in the next year or two, probably. Very, very unlikely. If you have a card game, most card games usually last 3 to 4 years if they're lucky. And like I said, when the original Yu-Gi-Oh show, which got literally so many people hyped up about Yu-Gi-Oh back in the day, stopped, a lot of people stopped playing. If you're from that era, you may have stopped playing yourself after the original show. Or when you saw GX and you said, oh, this is awful. Possibly you may have thought that. You had the most chance to quit back then. A lot of players did. And the thing is, that was the worst time to be a Yu-Gi-Oh player, because a lot of players quit. Literally, like when the last show aired, people thought, oh, that's the end of Yu-Gi-Oh. Oh, it's boring now. It's not about Yugi, it's not about his travels, it's not about this, it's not about that. And people started saying the game was getting more broken. You know, when Cyber Dragon came out, because Cyber Dragon and before that was BLS and Chaos Emperor Dragon, they made special summoning a joke back then. If you don't believe me, ask a player that's been in this game for at least 13 years or 10 years, and they would tell you, back in the day, special summoning was special. Nowadays, it's a joke, but that's not the point of this video here. That's a different topic for a different day. So let me go over a couple of things that I've always heard people say, reasons why Yu-Gi-Oh is dying. Konami doesn't care about us. The game's too expensive. It's just all about, you know, meta decks. It's, you know, I've heard these excuses so many times. I know some of you guys out there may think I'm directing this directly at you. No, I'm not. I've just heard these things so many times. It's just like, you know, like again with this, and people, you know, if you talk to a person that used to play Yu-Gi-Oh back in the day and doesn't play it anymore, they're like, oh, Yu-Gi-Oh's dead. You know, if you go to any non like site that talks about Yu-Gi-Oh! That's not like a Yu-Gi-Oh! Based thing. They'll be like, oh, Yu-Gi-Oh!'s a dead game, Yu-Gi-Oh!'s a bad game. It's like this old joke that keeps recurring for 10 years, and you're like, I heard that joke 1,000 times. It's so boring now. Stop. Stop it. So, let's go over one of the first things, okay? Which is, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a very expensive card game. Now, if you're a teenager, or a young adult, or maybe you're in college, maybe you're in high school, maybe you're a very young kid. I get that. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is probably expensive, and it was for me too back in that day. But if you're in your 20s and you're got a part-time job, if you allocate your money properly, you can pay Yu-Gi-Oh! It's not hard. It's not really hard to do. I did it. I know a whole bunch of other guys that did it, and they had part-time jobs making $8 an hour, $7 an hour, and only working like 20 hours a week. Yet they were able to cover to deck regional playable decks, you know, to go take the regionals and do good. And that wasn't even that long ago. I'm talking like maybe 2-3 years ago. Game hasn't changed. I know it's changed a lot somewhat in 2 to 3 years, but still, I've seen it throughout Yu-Gi-Oh's history. People do it all the time. And on top of that, I will say that Yu-Gi-Oh! Over the last three years has gotten so much cheaper. And people say, no it's not, no it's not. If you use your money wisely and you invest in sets, and that is thunder. Yes, Thor, I know you're here. But if you invest in, you know, in the proper things, and you're patient and you're waiting and you're not like, get on the hype train every single time, you'll be good. Look at this past year, really, how many cheap decks, competitive cheap decks have come out. Okay, let's go over some here. Burning Abyss got the full reprint in the Mega Tins and in Gold Series. Cheap, affordable deck at a decent price. Okay, Cosmos got pretty much the entire reprint in the Gold Series. Cheap, affordable deck. Monarchs, pay $30. You pretty much can play a Monarch, you know, deck right from the get-go like that. Yeah, you may have to invest in the Karazes and stuff. So you're talking like what, $40? There's a lot. Literally, if you know where to look and you know what you're doing, you can pretty much build decks in this format. Even right now, as it's ending, you could have built a deck pretty much for less than $100, even $70. Now you may say, what about the extra deck? What about that? Yeah, the extra deck is where the money's at. But if you've played this game for a while and you've invested in the proper extra deck cards, you know, like good, just generic cards, you can play. I mean, you can play very well. You may not want, you know, be able to play, you know, the best build that you want to. That may take time, but if you do, you can still play, and you can still play well, and still do good. Just saying, you don't always have to play, you know, the best build. You can play a very good build and still do pretty good and respectable. No lie. So when people say that Yu-Gi-Oh is expensive, I get it if you're a kid. I get it if you're young. I understand. I've been there. I got it. But if you use your money wisely, you save up your birthday money, you save up the money that mom and pop got you, you know, whatever your case may be, you, like me, what I used to do back in the day, I know other people did, like, I mean, I learned this from my dad because he did it back in his day, like for bicycles. We would go get, you know, messed up bikes, fix them up, you know, paint them, you know, fix them up nicely, and sell them to the neighborhood kids in my area, make a couple bucks, maybe like, you know, $70 off that, turn around, buy a Yu-Gi-Oh deck, buy a Pokemon game, whatever the case was. And this is just back a couple years ago. Believe me, there's ways of doing it if you're very creative to make money in this world without doing it illegally. But let's go into the next thing. Konami doesn't care about us. Now, I get it, and I will agree with this topic to a point, that Konami's just sometimes, it's like talking in a mirror. They don't respond back to you. You know, it's like talking to you know, at a brick wall. It doesn't respond back. I get that. But if you look at the little gestures that Konami has done over the last couple of years, they would only do that if they really cared. Reprints, Megatins. Yeah, you may say Konami's a money business, but Pokemon makes money. Yu-Gi-Oh makes money. Vanguard makes money. Magic the Gathering makes money. Every card game I know that makes money. You know, it's a business. Yu-Gi-Oh's the same. They gotta make money. But you look at the little gestures they do care. Yeah, they may not be as reciprocating as, you know, some other games out there. Yeah, that sucks, and hopefully one day that will change. But look at the things they've done. Megatins, Gold Series, you know, they've made even things cheaper in a way by making ratios more, you know. Look at the sets nowadays. The last 2 sets we got, Shine Victories and Breaker of Shadows. All of these cards that people thought were going to be super expensive coming out of Breaker of Shadows were like affordable if you had the money. They weren't $100 cards. We haven't really, look at the last 2 sets. With all, even Breaker of Shadows, people were saying this is going to be a $100 card, this is going to be a $100 card, this is going to be a $100 card. And when the stuff dropped eventually and settled, there was no $100 cards in either set, and probably going into the next set and future. It's really hard now with these new ratios that Konami's done, with 2 secrets per box and like all these ultis, to really get expensive cards like they're over $100 anymore. It's really hard. And if people, I mean, if you had told me this, you know, maybe last year, I'd say yeah, that was a problem. But that's not a problem anymore. They've even, so you got Megatins, Gold Series, and you got this. Next thing, like I said, they're reciprocating. You look at these little things they did, these gestures, these legendary decks they're making, these Seto Kaiba structure, these movie packs. They got alternative eyes to us pretty dang quickly. I thought it was going to take a year and a half. It took us about 6 months. Thank you, Konami. Thank you. DDDs, yeah, but I think everybody wanted. I don't know. I'm not going to go down that road, but yeah, you get what I'm trying to say. Look at the little gestures they've done. Now people say, well, what about, you know, DN and Dev Pro, and you know, that's killing off the game. That may be somewhat killing off the online player community that doesn't want to download Dev Pro with, you know, anything like that. And I do hope that Konami does wise up and make a decent online game like other things, but probably there will be monetary transactions. But the problem is, there will always be somebody out there that will make another online Yu-Gi-Oh game for free. There will always be, probably, I could foresee, you know, eventually popping up another Dev Pro, another DN. You know, maybe not right now, but maybe a year from now there could be, you know, Dueling Book and all these other things popping up. You never know. I mean, I wouldn't quit over it. I wouldn't say, you know, yeah, it sucks. We were lucky to have DN. But there will probably be another DN down the road, or another Yu-Gi-Oh Pro. It will happen. I don't know when. I don't mean to be a prophet, but I believe it will happen eventually. So we've gone over communication issues with, you know, stuff like that. Let's look at some of the basic stat numbers. We had, and I would have said if it's a fluke if it was just one thing, but literally, when people are saying the Yu-Gi-Oh game is dying, and I'm seeing stat numbers of nationals and of freaking Euros nationals and freaking the North America nationals have record number attendance. People say, well, you know, that's only for the competitive community, the casual community is dying. I don't think so. I think maybe people just want to be more competitive. They want to be the best they can be. I mean, that's where I look at most players out there. Yes, some people want to be casual competitive like me, where I want to play the best deck I can and do the best I can with whatever deck I choose. You know, that's me. Be it competitive deck, be it casual deck. I'm somewhere in the middle. Kind of like a Linthio, I guess you could say, is a good example of this. If you really want to look at the guy. He plays Skull Servants. He plays Counter Fairies. But he also played Stellar Knights when they were competitive. You get what I mean? Something of that nature. And I know this this is just coming from the heart, guys, this video is, because I really just, it's been on my mind, and it's like gritting your teeth, and it's like, come on, this is just, makes me mad. This is kind of like a rant video, I guess, but not really. But, you know, people tell me that, you know, I look at those numbers and I can attribute, and nobody's brought this up yet, why were those numbers higher for both North America and Europe for Yu-Gi-Oh this year? Think about it. All the reprints, all the cheap competitive decks you could play this year, Gold Series, Megatins, freaking more ratios of cards, making them cheaper. Cheaper Yu-Gi-Oh means more players can get into the game for easier cash. Konami makes money, we the players don't have to pay as much, everybody's happy, maybe not the vendors, but Yeah, because they won't be able to pay those, you know, make those $100 bills rain, you know, with Dr. Storer back in the day. But the community should be happy about that. I really think so. I mean, I think that's one of the contributing factors of why we had good national numbers for this past year, and nobody's brought it up, and I don't understand why. The game's gotten cheaper. It really has. If you're not a rarity whore, the game has gotten cheaper. For me, I can honestly tell you, this year I've spent less, I've built more decks, and I've spent less money on the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And I buy a lot of cards, singles and whatnot, than I have in past years. And it's not the years I haven't done yet. I've already spent less money because the game is cheaper. It really makes a difference. And people, I just think, are just throwing that to the wayside. And it really sucks. Now, people say, well, the game's been dying for years. Power creep. Things of this nature. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about it. Power creep. Did you know that back in 1990, I think it was 1998 or 1999 when Yu-Gi-Oh! Was in Japan, Celtic Guardian was considered a meta-worthy card back in those days. The Stone Age, Previsozoic, you know, amoeba type of era in Yu-Gi-Oh! Back then. That was considered a meta card. Yeah, you didn't know that? Yeah, I didn't know that until I looked it up online. So, yeah, the game's evolved a lot. The game has been power creeped. New things come out, old things replace new, things are updated. That's Yu-Gi-Oh! That's any card game. It's a card game. Things will have to get, you know, powered out so you can make money. And people say, well, eventually it'll get to the tippy top and then it's gonna all fall down, you know. I haven't seen that happen. And the fact that Konami, the fact that power creep was made Blue Eyes relevant in the OCG and has made it a meta-worthy deck in the TCG in 2016 should speak volumes to what power creep can do to old archetypes. And freaking can speak volumes about, you know, you can play vanilla cards in freaking meta-worthy decks. I said the same thing back in Dino Rabbit. The fact that you're playing vanillas in 14 or no, not 14, excuse me. That's too soon. Like 2012, 2011. That's got to speak something for something. You know what I mean? I mean that you're able to still play vanillas. Konami has still made, in the last 2 years, you've made fusions relevant. You've made synchros a relevant deck in Yang Zings to some extent. You've made other good, you know, synchro monsters like Clear. Yeah, I know they're kind of not being used right now because there's not really good synchro decks, but they're good cards. They really are. You've made good Exceeds, synchros, good pendulums, fusions. Rituals were a meta-worthy deck. Yeah, that was a year ago, but still, that's within, you know, a year of time and everything. I mean, come on. I mean, that's amazing that they're still doing that in 2016 and 2015 this past year. That's amazing. Power Creep did that. It made old decks relevant, old mechanics relevant. Yeah, that was the Duelist Alliance era, but Konami could easily do that again. I mean, people say, and I think another thing right now why people are griping a lot is because the format. It's been the same since January, literally. Probably since January or early March. The format's been stale, you know, the same for what, the last 6-7 months. And people start griping. If there's anything I've learned about the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community, people start griping when things are the same for a long time. And every summer I notice after Nationals, the format doesn't change for, you know, a month or so after Nationals. And everybody's like, come on, I want to go play the new format. And they're like, oh, I'm waiting. Oh, this game is dying. Nobody wants to play. That's because everybody's just waiting for the new format to happen. Waiting for the new stuff to come out. You know, waiting for those reprints to happen. Things of that nature. Game's not dying. Game's fine. And it will continue to hopefully improve. Konami streaming things now. Better. They're doing a better job about that than they used to. I'll tell you that. They never streamed before. Numbers are up. Game's getting cheaper. Game may be a little bit complex still. Granted, I'll give you that. But still, I think the game's doing pretty well. And I think I covered all the main points I really want to cover. I may have missed something, and if I did, I know you guys will probably let me know down in the comment section and we can talk about it. But I personally believe the game is fine, guys. I don't think it's going anywhere. And Arc V, I'll mention very quickly before my video runs out here. Arc V is a really good anime, and I don't think it's as good as I think it's very good, honestly. Like I've said before, and I don't know how that's contributed. The problem is when you're watching anime in Japan and watching it compared to the TCG, it's a lot different. They change a lot of things, and I don't think it's as good here in the US and in Europe than it is in Japan. But that's all I'm going to say. Till next time, guys, take care, have fun dueling, good luck dueling, and tell me about what you think of the health of the game if you